So now that I've caught up to JoJo's Bizarre Adventures, I've ranked JoJo's parts, I've ranked JoJo's fights, it's time to rank JoJo's characters. I wasn't sure how to go about it. I was thinking, do I just rank the Joestars? Do I rank the JoBros? Do I put this all in separate videos? Eventually I settled on, hey, there's too many great characters in JoJo's. I need to talk about as many as I can. I'm going to talk about every main character from every main cast. That is 28 characters that I'm going to be ordering from 28 all the way up to number 1. And number 28 is Trish. That might be blunt. We might have got right into it, but a handful of these characters towards the bottom, it's not that they're bad characters, it's just that they are nothing to me. They mean nothing. And out of everybody in any main cast, Trish is about as nothing as you can get. We find out she's the daughter of Diavolo, which means that there are some daddy issues at play that appear to go unresolved. Or not unresolved, but I should say, I felt like she would play a bigger part in the defeat of Diavolo, and she simply didn't. A stand that I quite frankly am not too fond of, maybe because I didn't see it used all that often, but Trish was a character that just left me wanting more, and I think the reason for that being is that as the daughter of Diavolo, I just had higher expectations for her. So her being number 28 not only makes her the lowest ranking character in Golden Wind, but the lowest ranking character in all of JoJo's. And number 27, I have Emporio. Emporio was somebody who was at risk of being number 28, but that last episode definitely put him above Trish in my eyes. His finale with Pucci and the way that he ended off in a new universe as the only person in the entire series to be aware of the events that happened prior, that single detail, that single episode puts him above Trish in my opinion. At number 26, and I'm very scared, I'm very scared. If you've been watching some of my previous videos, I try to prep you all with this take, but Speedwagon is my number 26. Yes, that does make him the lowest ranking character in Phantom Blood. Yes, I'm aware that the Speedwagon fan base incorporated is gonna come after him. I understand. I think a lot of his shortcomings as a character come from the fact that we just don't see a lot of him. All the Phantom Blood characters trend lower towards the list. We only saw about 9 episodes of the Phantom Blood characters, and I know the Speedwagon makes an appearance in part 2, but it's not really his character that I'm fond of, it's his creation, his baby, the Speedwagon Foundation, which is one of the pillars of JoJo's. Speedwagon's impact is for sure unquestionable, but as a character that I personally bond with and feel for, I can't say that I feel the same way towards Speedwagon that I feel towards other characters, so that's why he's at number 26. But moving on to number 25, I have Baron Zeppeli. I told you the part 1 characters would trend towards the bottom. I'm aware that Baron Zeppeli appears in less episodes in Speedwagon. I'm aware that he is less loyal to the Joestar lineage than Speedwagon, but just to be quick about it, just to get to the point, the reason why I have Baron Zeppeli over Speedwagon is simply because not just did he introduce the Hamon power system to Jonathan, to the Joestars, but also to the viewers. To me, it really is that simple. And of course, you know, they're one spot next to each other. They're about as interchangeable as it gets. This also is not that serious of a list, but that's why I have him where I have him. At number 24, I have Anasui from Stone Ocean. Personally, one of my favorite design characters in the series, but for a decent part of Stone Ocean, Anasui's entire gimmick was going up to FF and telling FF, look, you promised me you would do this, you promised that Jolene and I would get married, and that insistent lover character trait is not a trait that I'm particularly fond of, and unfortunately, Anasui is a victim of that character trope. I've seen it ruin a lot of characters in animes before, and unfortunately, Anasui is a character that, while not all the way bad, definitely suffers from that persistent love and lust that he has for Jolene. But at number 23, I have Jonathan, and yes, that does make him the worst JoJo in my eyes. Not that I think he's a bad character or a bad MC whatsoever, but he was just a little bit bland, so I can't blame him, but that's where Jonathan falls in my opinion. But now we're getting into the tier of characters that actually captured my attention, and at number 22, I have Hermes from Stone Ocean. First female JoBro, that's cool. Also a very compelling story with one of the stand users and her sister, and she was also part of one of my favorite fights in Stone Ocean, so she gets bonus points for that. But besides that, I felt like she wasn't as pivotal towards the story as like other JoBros, and from my point of view, it almost felt like she got overshadowed by a handful of characters in the Stone Ocean cast. I did feel like Hermes could have given us more. But at 21, I have Avdol. I'm so surprised that he's this low. This was really the eye-opener, like wow, there are really a lot of good characters in JoJo's. I think part 3 has such a phenomenal cast, and what holds a lot of the cast members back is not the fact that they themselves are bad characters, but a lot of that screen time gets hogged up by a certain somebody. Avdol is definitely one of those part 3 characters that should have got more screen time time than he did, but regardless, he was still a great character. He was devoted to the Joestars. He had a good reason for taking on Dio. He had one of the first stands we seen in the entire series, and it was a pretty dang cool stand. And when he died, I was upset. And to me, that's a pretty good character. Avdol is like the quintessential side character. But at number 20, I have the first character from Battle Tendency. I have Lisa. Now, Battle Tendency had a pretty small main cast, especially in comparison to the later parts. You have Joseph Caesar and Lisa, and in my opinion, yeah, it's pretty clear cut. Lisa would be the worst one of that list, but she was a great character. I liked her a lot. She taught Jonathan and Caesar, prepped them for their fight versus the Pillarmen, and then by the end of the part, we find out that she's actually Jonathan's mom. That was the first like jaw-dropping moment I'd seen in JoJo's, and for that, she gets a lot of credit. I love her character, but I was left a little disappointed that we didn't get to see Lisa show off her abilities versus Cars for a little bit. At number 19, I have Okuyasu, which makes him the first part 4 character on the entire list. It's rough. Unfortunately, they made Okuyasu this very stupid comic relief character almost, which is not inherently bad. Like, there are very good, stupid comic relief characters, but the thing that irks me about Okuyasu is that they purposely gave him one of the best stands in the entire series. Conceptually, what a phenomenal stand. And then Okuyasu's entire gimmick is, oh, hey, man, you're stupid. What if we gave you this awesome stand that you can't utilize because you're just a Nimrod? Which then changes the character dynamic from, hey, this guy is stupid, haha, point and laugh, to, hey, you're kind of annoying me here because you're so moronic that you're underutilizing your broken stand. And because of that, although Okuyasu did have pretty good subplots, you know, with the death of his brother, and he was a pretty dang good friend to Josuke, I'll never take that away. Okuyasu was a great guy. He did annoy me at times where it's like, I would have loved to see Okuyasu do something major. At number 18, I have Abbacchio. Talk about a complete 180 and utilizing your stand to the maximum. Abbacchio is the lowest ranked part 5 character in my opinion, and it's funny because part 5 is also one of those casts that I can look to and say, this might be the best cast in the entire series, and it's because my least favorite part 5 character is just objectively great. When I think of Abbacchio, the first thing that stands out to me is his beautifully written death. It was beautiful when he looks under the table and sees his police brethren that died because of his incompetence, I suppose. And overall, Golden Wind is the part that I believe to be Araki's best written work, and the character writing shows that as well. It reflects it, because even though Abbacchio might not be my personal favorite Golden Wind character, I still think that he is a phenomenally written character. At number 17, I have Rohan, and do I think that Rohan is better written than Abbacchio? Not even close. I don't think he's better written than maybe a lot of the characters that I have under him, but you know what Rohan does have? He's funny. Yeah, this is really where I feel like you can start to see where some of my values might lie with characters. I do like the comic relief characters. I do like the funny characters. Rohan had some funny moments. I know that Rohan is kind of divisive. There's a group of people that's very anti-Rohan, and I know that Rohan is not the most kind character in the series, but you can classify me as a Rohan fan, okay? At number 16, I have Weather Report. Now, Weather Report gets a little brought down by the incest stuff. All of that is a little odd to me. It's funny because I feel like Weather Report should be somebody that is extremely high on this list, because I do think that his connection to Pucci is really what made his character as great as it was, because I liked Weather Report before, but then turns out, oh, he's actually Pucci's brother. And then I'm like, that's why he was kind of given this impression that there was more to him than meets the eye earlier on in Stone Ocean, and then boom, incest plotline, and it's like, whoa, I might be shallow-minded, you know, I'm aware that it is accidental incest, but he's also one of the most fleshed out character, if not the most fleshed out character in the entirety of Stone Ocean. So I don't know. I think without a doubt he has one of the saddest backstories in the entire series as well. So I'm very interested in seeing where y'all would place him. At number 15, I have Iggy. It's so funny seeing Iggy up here because, you know, spoiler, this is the only dog that's going to be on the list. Iggy speaks for one episode. One episode Iggy speaks for, and he is all the way up here. Maybe I just love dogs, but Araki did a great job at portraying a dog to be not only loving, caring, but also extremely badass and smug too. And Iggy also gets, you know, maybe undeserved points for his death, because his death was very touching, maybe in fact because he was a dog. But regardless, Iggy is a character that really held down Stardust Crusaders, especially when it was feeling, you know, repetitive and lackluster. Iggy always had great episodes, I will say. At number 14, I have Mista, and Mista is another one of those characters that is a part of the Golden Wind main cast, so of course he's gonna rank fairly high. I will say there were a couple times where he got on my nerves, but I think for the most part he was one of the characters that had a lot of screens. He got a lot of fights, a lot of opportunity to showcase why he's as good of a character as he is. In fact, one of the most memorable Golden Wind fights in my opinion is the fight where Bruno and Mista are on the train, and that's really where I started to fall in love, not just with Golden Wind, but this video is not about Golden Wind. This video is about the characters, but I started to fall in love with Bruno, and Mista, of course. At number 13, I had Giorno. I remember in one of my videos, I said Giorno is probably one of the worst JoJo's, and I guess he is because he's the second lowest ranking JoJo in my opinion. But I think there is such a gap from Jonathan. I mean, you saw the ranking from Jonathan all the way up to Giorno. I see a lot of Giorno slander. I see people call him boring. I see people say that he's not interesting. I disagree. I think he had almost the perfect character arc, especially at the end where he is the leader of Pasión. His motive to take down Diavolo and take over Pasión and get drugs off the street was extremely compelling. His backstory was very good with him being the son of Dio. His stand overall is one of the most unique in the entire series. And then when he gets the Requiem version, oh my god, like Giorno is so utterly hated on, and I see it a lot. A lot of people think that Giorno is boring. I disagree. I couldn't disagree more. I think that Giorno is a great character, but there's just so many good characters in this series, right? Like it's difficult. At number 12, I have Jolene. Could be interchangeable with Giorno now that we just got off the subject of it, but I think this is just a personal preference thing. I love her entire storyline with Jotaro and her not being close to her father, and then the way that we see the relation between Jolene and Jotaro rekindle throughout Stone Ocean. It was really nice. It was sweet. I loved it. Maybe fighting wise, like maybe in like a traditional shonen sense, I don't think that she had the amazing fights that Giorno did, but also as a character, she just had a lot more flair than Giorno. She's one of the most like abrasive and off the wall characters in the entire show, so that would be my personal reasoning for having her as high up as I do. And number 11, and this might come as like a major shock, I'm not sure how many people are even that big of a fan of this guy, but I have Fugo. When Golden Wind started, I didn't particularly hold Fugo in such high regard, but as it went on, then I find out he has probably one of the coolest stands in the entirety of part 5 for sure. But also he leaves the cast. He literally leaves the main cast, making him the one and only character that without dying decides he's going to leave the crew. And I'm aware that Fugo was originally supposed to be a traitor and turn on the crew, and I'm so glad that Araki didn't go with that angle. As much as I would have loved to see Purple Haze go up against the entirety of the crew, and I think that would have been a pretty epic fight, I just think it holds a lot more weight for Fugo to decide, hey, these are some of my best friends, but I can't do it. I think that is extremely powerful, but to show such vulnerability is what made Fugo's character so unique in my opinion from literally every other character on the cast. He's a one-of-a-kind character. I really like Fugo, and for that reason, he's number 11, just outside the top 10. But kicking off the top 10, in my opinion, I have Kakyoin, the first JoBro to have a stand, and with that stand, he made one of my favorite sacrifices in JoJo's when he set up that elaborate trap in order to figure out what Dio's stand does. I've always thought, and I've even said this in some of my videos, that Kakyoin could have been even higher on my top 10 list had he not been needlessly sidelined in part 3, which was upsetting because when Kakyoin did get screen time, he had some of my favorite stand fights. He had some of my favorite moments. You know, I believe the Stardust Crusaders went through a little rough patch there with some of the stand fights that didn't really entice me all that much, but every time Kakyoin was on screen, I was engaged. I just think that Kakyoin is one of the most well-rounded characters in the series, and for that reason, he's my number 10. But funny enough, while we're on the subject of Stardust Crusaders, at number 9, I have Polnareff. Now, on one hand, Polnareff, you know, I have to be honest, you did take a lot of the screen time that should have rightfully went to characters like Avdol or Kakyoin, but also I wasn't too upset with Polnareff getting a lot of screen time because I quite liked Polnareff, and I know that a lot of people don't. I've seen some Polnareff slander in my videos, and to that I say, wow, like it must have sucked seeing him get so much screen time, right? But he was a little bit funnier than Kakyoin, which I always appreciated. Silver Chariot, although I didn't like it as much as Hierophant Green. When we got the Requiem stand and Golden Wind, I must say I don't know if that counts as a traditional stand, but it's one of my favorite looking ones. Speaking of, seeing Polnareff return in Golden Wind was one of the bigger shocks in the series because I thought that Polnareff was just as good as gone. Turns out he had a lot of history with Diavolo in it, and at that moment I'm like, wow, like how much love is this character gonna get? Like why are they going above and beyond the Call of Duty to flesh out Polnareff? Guy, it's over. Give it up, your part is done for. Yeah, overall funny character, great stand. Quite loved his fight with Vanilla Ice and Iggy. That's a big reason why I have him so high up. His character arcs was one of the most satisfying as well, seeing him start off as this douche, as this rude guy who then goes on to get revenge for his sister and then become a quintessential member of the Stardust Crusaders. I, again, just love Polnareff. Number 9. At number 8, I have a character that I don't think I've ever given my in-depth opinions on this character, but I have Koichi. I didn't really like Koichi at first because I'm not a big fan of characters that are like big-time wimps, and that was the impression that Koichi gave off at first. He was just like this wimpy character, no stand, no backbone, no reason to like him. But as part 4 continued, he got his stand, he was shot by a stand arrow. Still a wimpy character, his stand is not all that great at the beginning, but that's until his stand starts to grow. And it's funny because as Koichi's stand storyline begins to grow, his character does as well. With the turning point where I really started to like Koichi's character is when Koichi and Jotaro fought off against Kira. And in that fight, Koichi still shows off his wimpy tendencies, but it's Jotaro that has to give him that talk and smack him out of it. And past that point onward, Koichi was a beast. And you see the progression of Koichi's character, and still the wimp to level 100 mafia mob boss is not one of my favorite character archetypes, but Koichi made it work. And I think that's why I like him so much. Accompanied by having a really awesome stand and having some interesting side plots in Diamond is Unbreakable, like his love story with Yukaku and his dedication to Reimi and making sure that she rests easy. In the grand scope, Koichi really is a character that surprised me because I would not have been able to guess that he would have been this high off the beginning of Diamond is Unbreakable. But at number 7, one of my favorite JoBros, Caesar Zeppeli. I'll keep Caesar shorter because I've talked about him ad nauseum. Caesar is a character that I've talked a lot on this channel because he was really my first favorite JoJo's character. You know, his family pride, the dynamic between him and Joseph, the development between him and Joseph, his death, all of it plays a role in making one of the best characters in the series. Number 6, I have Foo Fighters. Another character that I've talked about at length on this channel. Really, most of my admiration for Foo Fighters is how much work they put in, because I kid you not, Foo Fighters did more than Hermes, Foo Fighters did more than Anasui, Foo Fighters did more than basically anybody on the cast. When I reminisce on Stone Ocean, when I reminisce on what my favorite moments and aspects of part 6 were, a lot of it has Foo Fighters in it, except for the final fight, of course, because somebody died early. I don't think that I like Stone Ocean as much as I do if it's not for Foo Fighters. But now we're in the top 5. My top 5 favorite characters of any JoJo's main cast. And number 5, Jotaro. Talk about a consistently great character. This is the most consistent character in the series. Obviously, his appearance in Stardust Crusaders, phenomenal character work. Then he's back in part 4 and he's still a great character. He's not in part 5 for too long, but come part 6, come Stone Ocean, he's back and he's the father of Jolene, and he's a pretty dang good character. This guy has been carrying a lot of different JoJo's parts for a lot of years. This guy was a part of so many of my favorite moments in the series. Part of Jotaro versus Dio, my favorite fight in the series. The Stone Ocean fight versus Pucci, the aforementioned Jotaro and Koichi versus Kira fight, while also being arguably the most badass character in the series. If Foo Fighters was the reason I like Stone Ocean that much, then Jotaro is a major reason why I like the series as much as I do, because he is so integral to it. And honestly, he could be higher. He could be interchangeable with my number 4, who is Narancia. Obviously, the impact that Narancia had on JoJo's as a whole was not to the same degree as a Jotaro, but oh my gosh, Narancia filled Golden Wind with life. Narancia, although he wasn't my favorite Golden Wind character, and if you've done the process of elimination, you know who's up next. Narancia was the heart and the soul of that group. As well written as Fugo was, Abbacchio, Giorno, Narancia brought the personality to the group, and he was like the little kid, the little brother of the group, which is why his death was so painful. And it was compounded by the fact that Narancia, alongside Fugo, was the only other cast member that was afraid to take on Diavolo. But still, Narancia weighed out his options and decided that it was better to go along with his friends anyways. But I don't know, that's just my opinion. I think Narancia was a lovely character that died way too soon. But at my number 3 spot, my third favorite character out of any JoJo's main cast, the character that carried Golden Wind in my opinion, alongside Narancia, I have Bruno. I've always thought this, I don't know if I've ever said it, and I don't know if it makes sense, but it makes sense to me, so I'm gonna say it. Bruno is about as close as a side character has come to being the main character. I love the dynamic that Bruno, although being the JoBro to Giorno, he wasn't second fiddle, he wasn't Robin, he was the leader of the group, and that's a dynamic that no other JoBro can claim to have. Of course, just like every other character in Golden Wind, the backstory was top tier, the motive for taking on Diavolo was top tier. I think that Bruno is one of the most admirable characters in the whole series, and it's funny because I think even the most adamant Golden Wind haters still give Bruno his flowers. This is about as clear cut as it gets, as much as I love Caesar. Of course, Caesar was my second favorite JoBro. There's a massive gap between Bruno and Caesar. You know, from forming the team to having one of the most iconic stands in the series to facing off against Diavolo himself, there's not a character in JoJo's, excluding the Joestars themselves, that has carried as much as Bruno has. I think it's so clear as day, and that's why in my eyes, Bruno is my favorite character that's not a Joestar. My number 1 and my number 2 are both Joestars. And my second favorite character from any main cast is Joseph Joestar. Remember how I said Narancia was the life of Golden Wind? Joseph was the life of Battle Tendency. Remember how I said that Bruno carried Golden Wind? Man, Joseph carried Battle Tendency. And yeah, Joseph appeared in part 3 and in part 4. He was good in part 3, but it's really his Battle Tendency appearance that puts him all the way up here. On one hand, he's badass like JoBro, but then he also balances out with the fact that he's arguably the funniest character in the entire series. And that's really the magic as to why I like his character so much. I realized on my first watch of JoJo's that this is really an unserious anime, and it's the unserious characters that I've come to love, characters like Joseph. But still, like I said, when Joseph wants to have one of the best fights in the series, like him versus Ultimate Cars, he can do that. And just like JoJo, he has that attribute of being present in some of my favorite moments in the entire series, being a key member of multiple main casts. If not JoJo, then Joseph is up there as one of the most important characters in the entire series as well. Joseph overall is like the perfect essence of what it is to be a JoJo's character. He's the perfect embodiment of that to me, so in my opinion, he's my number 2. But by process of elimination, my number 1, my favorite character in all of JoJo's, it's Josuke. Diamond is Unbreakable is my favorite JoJo's part, so there's always going to be a special place in my heart for the main character of my favorite JoJo's part. But Josuke has a lot of the same qualities that makes Joseph such a great character. And it's funny because he's his son, right? Josuke is another character that you're able to just turn on JoJo's and he will put a smile on your face without a doubt. That's one of my favorite qualities in any character. But then just like his father, he can turn around and be part of some of the most epic moments in the entire show, like his fight versus Kira, which is my second favorite fight in the anime. But there's a third character trait that I want to talk about that is probably what makes Josuke my favorite character in JoJo's, and it's his relatability. Josuke is not larger than life. He's not as magnanimous as Jonathan was. He's not as badass and just stone cold like JoJo was. He's not as happy-go-lucky as Joseph, but he's just a kid. It's as simple as that. We've heard multiple times throughout part 4 that Joseph just wants to continue living his life like it's always been. He's just a school kid that wants to hang around with his friends and do kid things. And of course, he gets dragged into this whole serial killer investigation, but it wasn't up to him, and if it was up to him, he would just continue living the same regular life as everybody else. And that's exemplified by the fact that he doesn't return, he doesn't come back. As much as I would love for Josuke to come back, it almost doesn't make sense for him to come back. He almost exists solely within his own world, the world of Morio, and I think that there is something beautiful within that. So those are all of my favorite characters from the main cast ranked, but now I'm going to rank the main cast as a whole. In my opinion, the best main cast is Golden Wind. I think that Golden Wind is steady, very solid, 2 characters in the top 5. I think my second favorite main cast is Stardust Crusaders. It's hard to go wrong when you have JoJo and Joseph both within the same main cast, and for that same reason, I'm putting Diamond is Unbreakable at number 4, because we have Josuke, we have JoJo, we have, granted, a watered down version of Joseph, but although the JoBro, Okuyasu is not the strongest, we have characters like Koichi and Rohan that are able to make up for that. Then I have Battle Tendency, which might seem weird being this low, but again, although Joseph and Caesar are 2 of my favorite characters in the entire series, I guess the issue would be that there's just not enough characters. Then I have Stone Ocean, which didn't really have many standout characters besides Jolene and Foo Fighters in my opinion. And then I think Phantom Blood last is pretty fair. So that's my opinion on every main cast ranked. I'd love to hear your opinions. Maybe ranking every single character would be a little too much work. I mean, this video is 25 minutes long, but still, rank the main cast, rank the characters, rank whatever you want. And I'm interested in seeing how this is going to change when I get into Steel Ball Run. But that's for another time. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching all the way to the very end. Take care, everybody. Peace.